Okay, we are live. I hope you're doing okay. I hope you had a really good week. Today marks the 30th anniversary of the murders of Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Stevie Branch, Chris Byers, and Michael Moore, the three 8-year-olds left to ride their bikes in West Memphis, Arkansas, and never returned home alive. Their killers, Damien Echols, Jason Baldwin, and Jason uh, Miss Kelly. They were convicted in February. Jesse Miss Kelly were convicted in February of 1994. The killers became a cause celeb after the HBO Paradise Lost documentaries were released. In fact, these documentaries were so popular that there were three more documentaries. This launched a star studded, well moneyed campaign estimated to be in the 10 to $20 million range. And that campaign hit pay dirt in 2011 when the state accepted their request for an Alford plea. Now, an Alford plea is legally a guilty plea, but you can publicly maintain your innocence. And the state accepted, they were released, and they got off parole this year. Joining me is Lisa O'Brien from the Based in Fact podcast. Welcome.
Hi, Roberta. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, and thanks so much. If you have not listened to Lisa's great episode on Rodney Reed, definitely check it out. I thought it was fantastic.
Thank you.
So, what makes you believe that the West Memphis Three are guilty?
Well, when you look at all of the evidence, circumstantial and otherwise, it all points to them. There's three victims, three knots. They were killed in a remote area but near their homes. Um, there's no way a single person could have handled all three boys. Taking three victims, three perpetrators, that makes the most sense. And really, when you come down to it, even with the DNA evidence that they did get, there's little or no nuclear DNA implicating anyone else.
I agree. And oh, Josh Diaz from the lab has joined us
Hi,
fashionably
Josh.
late. Welcome, Josh. I told you this would be filled with surprise
How are you?
special guests.
Very
Thanks.
well.
So, what makes you think the West Memphis Three? I mean, we're kind of like the guilt group here. I mean,
Yeah.
what makes you think that the West Memphis Three are guilty?
It's just one of those things of the overwhelming circumstantial evidence. You know, back when this happened, it wasn't DNA wasn't anything that was really relied upon like it would be now. And I can guarantee if they had committed this crime now, these days, there would probably be substantial DNA. Not that there wasn't any sort of, DNA like the necklace that Damien had that for some reason had somebody else's blood on it that wasn't his blood type. That was never, they almost stopped the entire trial for that and they decided not to. Damien being seen leaving the scene of the crime covered in mud. Just I don't know, the 7 or 8 full confessions from Jesse. There's just, to me, it seems like there's so much there and it's hard to overlook.
I agree. For me, I would agree. We're always talking about totality of evidence, and in this case, for me, I think it's a lot of the things that some of the things the jury didn't see, like Jesse Miss Kelly's multiple post conviction confessions. When I heard that, that was pretty much game over for me.
Right.
But for a lot of people that are deeply connected to these movies and deeply connected to these killers, I feel like there's no evidence that will be enough. And also, it's the fact that they lie so much about their case and that they've switched suspects. So we've gone from one grieving stepfather to another grieving stepfather to now some shadowy figure in the West Memphis Police Department.
Right.
That's awfully suspicious.
That's another right. And as Josh pointed out, if the crime were committed today, we would have had probably conclusive DNA from Jesse Miss Kelly's t-shirt and Damien's necklace. Whereas in 1994, the DNA results from those two items were inconclusive. But you notice those are two items that have never sought to be tested in any of their DNA requests.
One more time, which two items?
There was
Lisa?
a t-shirt seized from Miss Kelly.
Uh-huh.
And then the necklace seized from Damien that had
Right.
inconclusive results based on HLA-DQ alpha, which basically said the blood could have belonged to Michael Moore or Jesse Miss Kelly on the t-shirt, or it could have belonged to Steve Branch or Jason Baldwin on the necklace.
Yeah, that necklace part of the documentary. It like flies by really fast. It's almost like out of context. You don't know what's happening. It's like, oh, we found this blood on the necklace. Oh, yeah, they're talking about ridiculously stopping the whole trial for this thing. And then it's just
They cut pretty much all of it out, didn't they?
Right.
Like
that was cut out, and it was.
It was as an extra. Okay.
As an extra
you can see it on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm having a.
And I think they tacked it on as an extra in Paradise Lost 3, which dealt with the Alford plea and the release from prison.
Let's talk about that Alford plea. So many people argue with me and they say, well, it's not a guilty plea. They had to take it. You would have taken it had you. And I just want to show you a little bit how this Alford plea, this is from their press conference. And I just wanted to show how the narrative of why they took the Alford plea and what's it about, how it changes. Just like a little bit from these two interviews.
Still very much in shock, still overwhelmed. You kind of have to take into consideration that I've spent almost the past decade in absolute solitary confinement, so I'm not used to being around anyone, much less this many people. It's kind of overwhelming.
Is it bittersweet?
It's not perfect. It's not perfect by any means, but at least it brings closure to some areas and some aspects. We can still bring up new evidence. We can still continue the investigations we've been doing. We can still try to clear our names. The only difference is now we can do it from the outside instead of having to sit in prison and do it.
This was not justice. At the beginning, we told them the truth that we were innocent, and they sent us to prison for the rest of our lives for it. Then we had to come here, and the only thing that the state would do for us was to say, hey, we'll let you go, only if you admit guilt. And that's not justice no matter how you look at it. They're not out there trying to find who really murdered those boys. And I did not want to take the deal from the get-go. However, they're trying to kill Damien, and sometimes you just got to fight gun to save somebody.
I want to publicly thank Jason, too, just to let him know that I do acknowledge what he did, that he did want to keep fighting. He didn't want to take this deal in the beginning. And I recognize and acknowledge that he did do it almost entirely for me. Thank you.
Mr. Braga?
I'm getting all teary-eyed over here.
Yeah.
Oh, that clip just so much about that press conference amazes me, and I see different things in it each time. But you gotta love Damien. Immediately makes it about him. You gotta understand. I'm not used to being around people. You see, I've been in solitary confinement, not seeing anyone. I've been actually.
I forgot how to use a fork.
The prison.
In prison because they didn't let me have forks.
Not that long ago, he was complaining that his hands didn't work, so he couldn't use a cell phone. And then he was talking about how flying across the country really messes him up a little bit. And he's like, I don't know what it is, but when I do these like New York to California flights, something and I was sitting there thinking, yeah, it's called jet lag, you big dummy.
He's like, I don't know what happens.
It's all because he was in prison.
Tired. Right.
Everything has to do with him being in prison.
But you heard it from the horse's mouth not the horse's mouth, the horse's friend's mouth, that they're trying to kill Damien. And,
Mhm.
you know, actually you heard it from both, you know, he was going to die. He was nowhere near execution. Nowhere. I mean, with that campaign, with that amount of money to campaign, he was nowhere near execution date. They act like he's Richard Glossop, you know, the second coming of Richard Glossop or something. I had to do it. And then I love Jason Baldwin is so good at playing the innocent sap. I used to get really fooled by him. Everything's in this. I think of this case as really the ultimate innocence fraud case. Everything's like a shell game. So like they have you looking over here, so you're not looking over here. I think that Jason Baldwin let everybody know that he was angry. He didn't want to take it. But here, I took it. Somehow I took it. I didn't want to be a convicted child killer. I didn't want to plead guilty to killing 3 kids. But I did. And I'm darn angry about it. Gosh darn it. I'm so
as crazy
angry
as it is, his life on the outside is worse than it was on the inside.
Yes.
True.
And, you know, that happens to a lot of people that spend a lot of time in prison, and a lot of them are scared to be released. Even Damien talked about, like, yeah, he had it a lot better than I did, which I'm guessing probably did. I mean, Damien was on death row, but I've heard death row is kind of probably it's better than just a life sentence sometimes, just because you somehow are a little bit more secluded. You're not around there's just a lot of different, you know, things that
You
death
get your
row
own TV.
you get a lot of different things. And he's just, but yeah, I could see he made it about, oh, well, I didn't want to do it because I wanted to keep trying to clear my name. The only thing that they do to try and clear their name is to get some laces, like try to get these laces tested, because they know that nothing would come of it. And the reason they target those laces is because obviously of the hair that was found.
Right.
And they think that that's their best way to divert attention away from them.
I noticed that the Innocent Project likes to test ties a lot and ropes a lot. That's like almost like their favorite.
Yeah.
There's another great guest episode about Johnny Lee Gates in Georgia. And the same thing, they had passed these ties around the jury. This is what gets me really worried about Rodney Reed. And if you want to know more about Rodney Reed, check out Lisa's great guest episode on this channel. So, but people find that that DNA was very convincing when and we're kind of we'll circle back to Damien Echols and how he changes the story about the Alford plea in a second. But people are very convinced about that DNA. Didn't the DNA belong to the stepfather? Who wants to take that?
I will take that. That is one of my biggest pet peeves, because they are, in essence, they are lying. Mitochondrial DNA is not unique to an individual the way nuclear DNA is. Mitochondrial DNA is passed down unchanged through the maternal line. My great grandmother along my maternal line has the same identical mitochondrial DNA to me. My uncle has the same mitochondrial DNA. My nephew has the same mitochondrial DNA. So it's not unique, and therefore you cannot say that DNA belongs to Terry Hobbs, because it's not nuclear DNA, it's mitochondrial DNA. So that's my biggest pet peeve, because Echols does lie about that frequently.
So it matches like 30 million Americans, of which Terry Hobbs is one of them. Is that
yeah, but it could be, it could belong to him. It could belong to any of his siblings. It could belong to his mother. It could belong to his grandmother. It could belong to somebody in his mother's family. It could belong to his maternal aunts and uncles. It could belong to his great grandmother. I mean, it's not unique to Terry Hobbs. And another issue that I have with the hair from the binding as well as the hair from the tree stump is the evidence hairs and the exemplars from Hobbs and Jacoby actually differ at one nucleotide.
What does that mean?
That means that the evidence hairs could be actually two universes. The one nucleotide difference opens it up. So they can't exclude, but they can't say it belongs to.
That's
It's just that they
interesting.
can't exclude them.
And Lisa, to piggyback off of what you're saying there, all that is very well said and completely true. However, who cares if it's Terry's hair?
Yeah. Exactly.
Flat out. I mean, it was his stepson. Those kids were around him more than they were ever around Damien and his little buddies. I mean, you would expect there to be some sort of secondary transfer, fibers, whatever.
And the
FBI didn't give like one damn about it.
yeah.
And it's amazing to me that the supporters just completely ignore all the circumstantial evidence against the West Memphis Three, yet target this hair as the end all be all. And they're either, I've come to the conclusion that they're either willfully ignorant or they were just born that way and it's their cross to bear for the rest of their lives. I don't understand how they get to that point.
Yeah, but so quickly that they switched. The same people that argued passionately that John Mark Byers was a jeweler and the kids were cut up to surgical precision, and they would make these crazy arguments, and they would his teeth were removed, and they would argue till they're blue in the face, and then as soon as they switched stepfathers, not a thought was given. And now it's like, oh, forget that we harassed Terry Hobbs and basically made his life really difficult. We've just moved on now. Now it's some shadowy figure, so shadowy that we can't even say who it is.
It's the craziest thing. I mean, it was all John Mark Byers for the first episode or for the first installment of that.
First two.
The first two. Yeah. And then the third one was like, Terry Hobbs. And by the way, I just recently, I think within the last 2 or 3 months, maybe a couple months, did an interview again with Terry, and people are dumb that are like in my comments. I went and opened up the held for review comments, and I looked at it and I go, oh my God, I'm going to close this box and never open it again.
They're vicious. They just, I'm a terrible person. I'm so dumb. And then they'll just say, one line, Terry Hobbs did it. I was like, well, thank you. Well, that changes my mind. That incredibly concise argument changes my mind.
One of my favorites. Yeah. Terry Hobbs.
Well, I've never heard you say that
stamp
before.
It. We're done. It's all over. It doesn't make any sense at all. Apparently, Terry being a butcher from being a teenager, because his family owned meat packing factories or whatever, makes him the perfect scapegoat. Never mind that Damien was locked up in mental institutions against his will for threatening to kill his parents while he was in there drinking the blood of self-harmers and things like that. I mean,
killing dogs, exploding cats, putting stakes through frogs. I mean, just the animals alone. Sometimes people have really.
It all leads up. It all leads up to.
The problem is
Damien was on his way to being a serial killer.
I agree. The problem, I think, too, is that supporters discount anything negative about Echols.
Yeah.
But then if somebody says something negative about Terry Hobbs or John Mark Byers or any other suspect, it's gospel. And the people who are saying it, Pam, is beyond reproach.
Right.
in spite of her criminal history, her sisters are beyond reproach. None of these people have a motive to lie.
Mm.
And yet everybody who said anything about negative about Echols is just playing into the satanic panic.
Oh,
And that's how it is. It's that double standard. They can't recognize that they even have it. Like Echols gets a pass because he was a kid, but Hobbs is an adult. So he's got to suffer for whatever he did. And it's just a ridiculous. That's why I've stepped back from this case a little bit more, because I just can't deal with the constant back and forth. And it really depresses me now that people let Echols have a pass and just continue to lie about the facts of the case. Because that's where I'm at. They're lying.
Oh, no doubt about
Speaking
that.
of lying, that's a brilliant segue to circling back. This is Damien Echols on his life in prison and taking the Alford plea. It changes a little bit, a few months after being released, I believe.
Damien Echols, released from Arkansas Department of Correction, Varner Unit in 2011, in an interview with Amy Goodman, makes this chilling statement.
What it all came down to for me was we knew we would win this eventually. We would be exonerated eventually. The state knew that. But they presented this deal to us, basically saying, you can sign this paperwork and you can walk out of prison this week. You can go home before this week is out. Or you can refuse this deal, and yeah, you'll eventually win, but we'll drag this out for another 5, 10 years, however long it takes. You know, Scott Ellington also says in the movie, the prosecutor, that one of the considerations they had in agreeing to this deal was that the three of us together could have effectively sued the state for $60 million. So you take that in consideration with the fact that I also knew how corrupt and how desperate they were, and I knew they could have had me stabbed to death in that prison any day of the week for $50. So I knew I would never live to see that exoneration.
Okay. I mean, it's really like a cartoon villain.
Well, they had 20 years to do that. Nobody could come up with $50.
Uh-huh. Yeah, really. I know.
Is the offer still on the table?
Yeah, right.
I mean, yeah. Why would they not? Why would they not do that? Like right after Paradise Lost came out. Oops, sorry, he's dead. It's over.
Right.
I don't. Yeah, it doesn't. It makes absolutely no sense. And people buy his followers, but go, oh, that was so profound. And it was like, no, it wasn't. It doesn't make any sense at all. Oh, but he's I don't know. He's like an archangel. He's something. It's like, nah, he's an idiot. And Lisa, when you were saying earlier about how you step back from this case, and I completely understand. I mean, you can say things until you're blue in the face. However, I don't try to convince the hardcore supporters of anything. I'm only talking to people that want to objectively, that are like, you know what? I don't know enough about this case. I've seen the documentaries, and they're, interesting, but I dug a little deeper. Well, those are the kind of people that I don't even argue with people. I used to argue with everybody in the comments. Now it's like, if somebody has a genuine question, a real question, I'll explain it to them, and then that's it. And I've had hundreds, maybe more, send me messages saying, wow, you really showed you really showed me something I'd never seen before. I went into this whole, you guys are familiar with the Alvis Clem Bly interview. Yeah. I mean, one of the most telling interviews that I had ever really heard of, that nobody talked about. Terry and I talked about that. Terry didn't even know about Alvis, and it, his
for the audience, who was Alvis Clem Bly?
Alvis was this 34-year-old pedophile who was locked up for inappropriate actions against at least a couple of children. He was a part of what they call their cult that would meet, I believe it was like on Sundays or something like that. And he knew Jesse very well. He didn't know Jason that well. And in his interview, he kept calling Damien Davian because he wasn't that familiar with Damien. But there was like sometimes there were up to 30, 40 people there. Sometimes it was 10. And they would show up and it was the dog sacrificing with the it was the sticks, you know, how they peeled back the bark of the sticks and would beat on the animal and do terrible things to the dog's privates and
there's also a witness that said she believed that Jason Baldwin was trying to steal her dog. And there's also the confessions of Jesse Kelly, where he talks about eating dogs. So
right,
take
and
that
so
or not take that, you know, believe it.
Albus actually claims that if he wasn't in jail, he probably would have been there with them when this happened, which is horrifying to even think about. But it's yeah. Now, Albus was the one that requested to talk to the detectives, and they were like, "We can't tell you anything." And he goes, "Well, did they do this?" And he said, "Well, we can't tell you that." And he basically is explaining to the detectives what they would do, and it basically overlaps perfectly what they would do to these animals as they did to the kids. This between the sticks and the mutilation and the beatings. I mean, they beat the hell out of those kids. And it's a terrible thing to even have to think about. What they did to those children was not of this world. It was just disgusting.
Yeah, I agree. This is one of the most disturbing cases. So it's interesting in Paradise Lost, when you see Damien walking by and the townspeople are screaming at him and, you know, just that hostility. When you look at it through the lens of innocence, it looks like this uneducated, Bible-thumping, pitchforky mob ready to get him for no reason. But when you really understand the case, you understand why they're so angry and they're yelling, you know, really awful things. But you understand where that anger is coming from.
And Echols cultivated that reputation within the community. I mean, he was the one telling the juvenile probation officers, "I'm in a cult. We're going to get ready. We're getting ready to graduate to human sacrifice." He was making these statements. You know, he walked around with a freaking trench coat all year round, black trench coat. He wanted that image. He wanted to be remembered. He wanted people to see him as the boogeyman, as he said in Paradise Lost. And the fact that he distances himself from these things and tries to twist it and spin it to make himself look like a victim is one of the, another one of the disgusting factors. And his supporters and minions, they make him a victim. They give him that victimhood. And and Jason Baldwin as well. You know, they want to be the victim.
Right.
By the way, I don't think that we're in the minority here, folks. I don't think that at all. I think that what I've figured out is there's like a core group of psychotic West Memphis 3 supporters, and all they do is bang on about this. And then the people that are like, yeah, they're guilty, they just move on.
Right.
So
I agree.
Yeah, it's the squeaky wheel thing. You know, yeah, you see all these. There is a core group. I don't know how many there are. It could be 1,000 or less, but it seems to be the same people commenting every single time, saying the same reused excuse or whatever, lie, basically lie. Not basically. It's a lie. What they're telling is they're lies. They're not. It's just not true what they say. So they'll just, you could say anything. Well, Damien was leaving the scene of the crime muddy. He didn't have an alibi. Well, what about the hair? It's like, shut up.
They'll say also, Hollingsworth recanted. That's what they'll say. Mrs. Hollingsworth, who saw her. But recantations should be looked at with suspicion. I mean, or at least I look at very closely what is said at the time, and if there's not a good reason why that story would change, I will look at it with suspicion.
Well, what often happens too that I've found in a lot of cases is you get people who don't know the cases, so they don't know the names, so they say Hollingsworth recanted when they may mean Donna Medford gave a statement helpful to Echols that maybe the girls didn't really hear him confess.
Right.
But they'll say that was Narling Hollingsworth recanting. I've never seen a recantation from Narling Hollingsworth.
I haven't seen anybody recant.
Vicky Hutchison recanted about her claims about Echols and Miss Kelly, but that was with a lot of pressure from Dan Stidham and supporters. Who
was that at trial though?
That was she basically
Pre-trial.
said she was so drunk and high when she testified at Miss Kelly's trial that she didn't know what she was saying.
Right.
And she gave helpful statements that said the police forced her to do what she did and get involved and give them helpful evidence, which wasn't really helpful and wasn't ever used against Echols.
Right.
But when she was called to say I lied when I testified, she wouldn't say that because the prosecutor, Brent Davis, wouldn't grant her immunity. And none of us would be sitting here if Brent Davis had not been elected to judge in 2010 or 2011. If he had been involved when the motions for new trial were going to hearing in December, he would have said, we can talk about your Alford pleas after the hearings. Because I'm convinced there was something in that DNA testing during that period in July of 2011 that they could not go to the hearing with that evidence in the hands of the state, and they would have had to turn it over to the state. And that's where they came up with the plea.
Lori misplaced the
yeah.
We couldn't find the paper. Well, where's that? We got to find that
They
DNA
don't know
paper.
where it is.
Like, whatever.
Yeah, but they want to do new DNA testing.
Well, hold on to that. I just thought it was very interesting that Damien Echols, when he talked about the Alford plea, he said the state was so desperate and so corrupt. I think they used those words.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, isn't that his projection of the ultimate of? Isn't that a good description of his team at that time? When you're talking about, Lisa, the DNA, those results come back. The only ones we've seen are the or heard about. The only is the hair. The rest hasn't been released. And just to give you an idea of what that is, hold on 1 second. I have it in my notes here. It's just like a whole list of stuff. I'm going to circle back to it. But what? Oh, here it is. Hair not tested, remaining biological extracts, the victim's clothing, except perhaps one. And this is courtesy of West Memphis 3 Facts on Facebook and Jennifer Carlson. Shout out to Jennifer. Bike's reflector, bikes, ice pick, cigarette butts and packs, child's wallet, hook and rope, all sticks found at the crime scene. And non-DNA shoelaces. So they asked for DNA on all the other things and non-DNA on the shoelaces.
Yeah.
All right.
And they could have done that in 2011.
So what is this?
Some of that, they may have tried to do some of that and there was no DNA returned.
Oh, also, let me just make this point because I think that it's very, very important. The state didn't offer them the Alford plea. They were the ones that brought it to the state.
Correct.
So
Ellington was willing to do a deal of some kind.
Sure, but it was the defense that brought it up.
And I want to say too, this whole BS about they could have sued for $60 million. No, they could not. Arkansas doesn't have a wrongful conviction statute, so they wouldn't have been entitled to a certain amount of money for each year they were in prison. It would have required exoneration, and as I said, I don't think they would have gotten that at the December hearings. Second of all, they would have had to sue under negligence theory. But if their exoneration is based on evidence that was not available at the time of their original conviction, they're going to have a very hard time proving that they were wrongfully convicted under a negligence theory.
And the fact that they did it.
So, well, yeah, that's
Right.
true too.
That too.
I
That
mean,
little
it probably would have ended up
technicality.
like Anthony Porter's attempt to get a certificate of innocence in Chicago, where the state of Arkansas would have come in and they actually proved Anthony Porter was guilty in
Right.
that whole trial. And so he didn't get his certificate of innocence. And then they had some egg on their faces over Alistair Simon's wrongful incarceration as a result of a coerced false confession by David Protus. But that's for another episode, Roberta.
Yeah, I just talked about that with William Ramsey. Two
But
YouTubers were talking about it like it was this great exoneration story. So we just talked about that.
It's just like Stephen Avery wasn't going to get $36 million from Manitowoc
exactly.
County.
All right, guys. Lisa's breaking all the big true crime myths tonight. Watch out. So my question is, if Damien Echols were guilty, which we all believe he is, why is he pushing for DNA testing? I mean, wouldn't someone who's guilty would sort of like sneak away into the shadows?
Because he's got inconclusive DNA results, and he's going to continue getting inconclusive DNA results that he can misrepresent as being exculpatory. Exactly. Because they misrepresent our DNA was not found. Well, no DNA from anybody was found, dude.
Well, everybody loves a story where, somebody was wrongfully convicted, which he wasn't, and is fighting on the outside to find the real killers, which he isn't. So every time he just says something, it's kind of where he pontificates, he's like, we're taking this to the Supreme Court. It's like, no, you're not. We're filing this. And his supporters are like, yeah, get it. And then nothing ever happens. And they're like, we're going to donate to you. Mm-hmm. And if he doesn't actively do that kind of stuff, his support, it's dried up a lot already. And so it's basically his chance to kind of keep his Patreons and stuff, keep that money coming too.
Right.
Yeah, he's got to keep his name in the public eye
and make him look innocent. I mean, if you really were innocent, would you get around to this right as your parole ends? Just sort of like as soon as, just 20 years later, they
didn't have to wait. They could have continued doing DNA testing. And of course, I mean, what was it? 2013 was the Billy Stewart. What were those two convicts named? The two rapists
who
that were housed with Jason Baldwin.
They were?
Billy Ray Stewart, Stewart and Benny Guy. Mm-hmm. That was the bombshell. Implicating L.G. Hollingsworth and Buddy Lucas. And they had their big hearing in Crittenden County. And Buddy Lucas was there, but they didn't call him to testify and address the alleged statements made by Benny Guy and Billy Ray Stewart or Billy Wayne Stewart or whatever his freaking name was. I mean, that was the sum of their exoneration efforts. Mm-hmm. And that was an attorney aptly named Ken Swindle.
Mm-hmm. The other thing is that Damien Echols, his portrayal of the state is like a cartoon. You can't pay the rent. You must pay the rent kind of mustachy villain. They knew I was innocent. They knew we'd eventually exonerate ourselves. They still haven't exonerated. 20 years later, no exoneration, guys.
Yeah.
And he made it seem like it was priority number one, that they could do more because they could. I mean, all those things were written by lawyers. They were all lawyers' arguments. They wrote him a script for that press conference, I'm convinced. We can do more on the outside. We can fight even harder. And then once you get out, fighting hard means showing up at events with Johnny Depp and getting matching satanic tattoos. Mm-hmm. And that's another really interesting thing about this case, which is even the nuns were saying, oh, Satanism has nothing to do with it, sort of taking it out of the case and making yourself, because hey, Terry Hobbs, it looks extremely weird to be talking about Satanism. It's like just such a weird beliefs, and you don't want to seem irrational and strange yourself by believing it, or a victim of satanic panic. But it's really hard to deny 20 years out, when all Damien Echols has done, besides his new karate career, which I'll get to, is devote himself to the occult. I mean,
he's literally a man baby. It's ridiculous. He plays with these little chemistry sets. Like, look, if I pour this white liquid into this white, other clear liquid, it turns it black. Wow. And it's like, yeah, dude, you can buy that on Amazon, and it says, for like 6 and under. Yeah, he is a cartoon character in the worst way.
And people love it. I mean, it's just, I was talking with William Ramsey about his Tim Pool interview, and it is so cartoonishly over the top. They were plotting to kill us. They knew we were innocent. They've been sitting on this evidence. It's a conspiracy in the West Memphis PD. And now, from being desperately anti-death penalty and showing up with Johnny Depp at this event and making a speech, Johnny Depp totally wasted out of his mind. It's a crazy video. I encourage everyone to go check it out. Right, Johnny Depp is like, he shows up in suspenders and it's all messed up. Yeah, amazingly. But it's just it's in the spirit of the event. You would think he would be a little bit more under control. Anyway, it's just he gets more cartoonish, and the more cartoonish he gets and over the top and conspiratorial, it seems like the more people love it. Mm-hmm. Is it just that we can't resist a good story?
I'm surprised that we are even still talking about this, because
he won't go away.
No, look, I get why we are. I'm just amazed that we have to, because this is one of the most controversial cases for absolutely no good reason. Look, forget all the satanic stuff. Aleister Crowley, Antoine LaVey, all that crap. Damien himself was the one that turned this in to the Salem witch trials, like he so much claims that it was. Damien wasn't just into the occult. Damien was into a lot of things. Damien wanted to be a priest. Damien wanted to be, I don't know, who knows? It sounds like he had an interest in stuffing dead animals at one point. I mean, he's first of all, he's a poser in everything that he does. And I would say that he's even a poser when it comes to satanic practice. Because, it was always, first of all, he denies it at trial. And the fact that he took the stand was amazing in itself. And he basically hung himself because they just tore him apart on the stand. So much so that Jason's lawyer in Paradise Lost goes, what'd you think? Do you see why we didn't let you go up there? Like, yeah. He's like, they made him seem pretty guilty, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
If you get off on this, you're gonna stop hanging out with Damien. Yeah. And then we can go to Disneyland. Yeah. Just like, what?
It's so bizarre. Unreal.
And then when somebody says, I don't know who that was that said, but when they said Damien at Jesse's trial, Damien's a good kid. Remember that?
Yeah.
And Jesse turns around and goes,
gives a look.
Like, yeah, right.
Shut the hell up.
I hate that. And you knew he did not like Damien at all. Jason did. They were buddies, but Jesse was more friends with Jason. He wasn't really that fond of Damien. I mean, he just wasn't. He thought he was a weird guy. That's coming from Jesse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And so let's talk about his latest. He is now a karate master. Tomorrow, May 6th, he announced on Twitter. Unfortunately, I could not see this announcement because I was blocked for no interaction that I'm familiar with having with him. But okay.
I'm blocked on every single social media account that Damien has.
Oh, it's a great club.
I love it.
Lisa?
Yeah.
I
don't really know if I'm blocked or not. I see these things when people post them on the group chats on Facebook, and my comment, I don't know if Roberta saw it. My comment is, I hope someone grabs him by the beard and strangles him with it at this at this competition. With the stupid Gandalf beard and the poopy diaper pants that he was wearing at that hearing in June for the DNA in Crittenden County.
Right.
Oh my God. Who let him out of the house looking like that?
Toast to everybody who's blocked.
Yeah, that's me. I want him to get kicked in the balls by a little kid at one of these karate things. That would be awesome. And I don't promote violence of any kind ever, unless Damien's the one that wants to play karate. So I really do hope somebody gives him a nunchuck right to the sack.
On May 6th, I'll be competing in the 20th annual Karate Master Invitational Tournament in Spring, Texas. It's open to the public and both I and the martial arts community. Now he's representing the entire martial arts community. I guess he already speaks for the child killer community. So, would appreciate your support. So now he's saying the entire martial arts community the public would like them to support paroled child killer, triple child killer, Damien Echols. Competition includes sparring, weapons, and board breaking. I mean, I'm ready to put in weapons in there. I mean, it feels like a little bit what Amanda Knox does, is she sort of teases out these tweets and then has people write articles about how she upset people with it. Like, oh, my crazy year abroad, ha ha ha, where I killed my roommate. She loves to do that. And I think Damien Echols has a little P.T. Barnum in him. And,
didn't you see the coffee that he sells?
No.
It was like, have you seen that, Lisa?
No, he's supposedly in New Orleans, and oh God, he better hope I don't accidentally run into him.
I'm sorry. My condolences, Lisa, but I had some rough years with him in New York.
Well, if he's down in the quarter, the crime rate, there's always a chance that somebody with a gun is going to come up and try to rob him, and maybe try to whip out those martial arts and get shot.
Right.
And I shouldn't joke. I'm not joking about the crime rate in my city, but
it's called Dead Sled Coffee.
Oh no, I haven't seen that.
That is tacky.
And it says it's tasty till the last breath.
Oh, that's
disgusting. And I totally forgot what I was gonna say, Lisa. I'm sorry.
No.
What we were talking about his he's just like it never stops with that guy with the karate. I always had the fantasy when he was in New York. What would I say? What if I saw him on the subway platform? What would I say, or what would I do? But I never came within anywhere near him, luckily.
Yeah, you would have felt a really cold breeze within
like
a couple
Dracula,
miles of him.
Right, the devil. Awful. And it's just, it's really sick though that the Central Park 5 get standing ovations, that Damien Echols is taken on the red carpet. I mean, what kind of world? I mean, it's not even, Josh, you mentioned that this is one of the most controversial cases, but not in Hollywood. In Hollywood, you can bring any convicted paroled child killer on the red carpet and nobody will say anything about it. And even, the people who are very pro Amber Heard, anti Johnny Depp will drag him all day long, 24/7. They won't like to mention Damien Echols because they're not sure. It's like this magic word innocence. Once again, just sprinkle the magic fairy dust, magic word innocence. And then nobody says anything because I don't know. He maintains his innocence. Oh, wait. Well, that changes everything.
Yeah, I mean, convicted killers are beyond reproach.
It really is.
That's the topsy-turvy world we live in,
He
where
confessed.
a convicted killer who maintains his innocence is more believable, even though they have the prime motive to lie to the public, to the world, to their attorneys, but they're beyond reproach. I don't know. I don't understand. I've always taken convicted killers, I take their word with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
I agree. Let's watch a little bit of the lies of Damien Echols. Let's hear some greatest hits with his lies.
The question that some people want to say is, well, what was his alibi? What were you doing? Why would police come to you? What was your alibi?
I had an entire day mapped out at that time period. There were many people that had saw me. At the time that the police say the murders took place, I was actually on the phone with 3 different people. The problem was the attorneys I had at the time, the public defenders, never even called them to the witness stand, never even asked them about this kind of stuff.
The claim.
I was on the time that they say the murders happened, I was on the phone with 3 different people. The attorneys that I had were so incompetent, it boggles the imagination. I asked them, why aren't you going to call these people up on the stand so that they can testify that they were on the phone with me? And they would say, we don't need them. The state's case is so weak and ridiculous as it is, there's no point in even wasting time on this.
And I asked you earlier, how do you keep sane in your cell on death row? But the fact is, before this trial, you spent time in a mental institution.
I did when I was younger for depression. And that was what led the cops initially to start focusing on me, is because there used to be this cop named Jerry Driver he was like a juvenile officer, and I had run-ins with him over and over and over again. And part of the reason is because he used to come through our neighborhood and pick up teenage boys and tell them, unless they gave him oral sex, he was going to take them to jail, press charges against them.
Driver was convinced that the murders were the work of Damien Echols, and he told that to the police.
Let's go back to 1993. Had you, that area, that Robin Hills area, was that an area that you were familiar with or had ever been in?
No.
To 1993. Had you, that area, that Robin Hills area, was that an area that you were familiar with or had ever been in?
No. That's actually, most people always call us the West Memphis Three, but we actually weren't from West Memphis. We were from a small town right outside of West Memphis called Marion, which almost no one knows where it is. And being that West Memphis is the closest thing to Marion, it's just sort of, people look at it as being almost the same place. And all of the dealings we had were with West Memphis Police Department. So West Memphis wasn't a place that I went to a great deal of time. I went to school in Marion, I lived in Marion, so I didn't really go to West Memphis a lot at all.
So where these murders took place, that was not an area that
No, because that would have been a residential area, a wooded area close to a residential area. There weren't any, if I went to West Memphis, it would have been to do something like, say, go to Walmart, go to the grocery store, something like that. So it wouldn't have been in a residential area anyway.
The police, the prosecutor, the judge, the jury, all of them got it wrong?
In our opinion, yes. In our opinion, yes.
Defense attorneys claim the confessions were coerced.
He couldn't even get a single detail of the crime right. They would ask him things like, well, what time did this happen? He says, 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, they knew that was a lie. They knew it wasn't true because the kids were in school at 8 o'clock in the morning. They didn't care.
Both Byers, Michael Moore and Stevie Branch, were found naked and hogtied in a West Memphis ditch. Prosecutors say the murders were part of a satanic ritual.
You had nothing to do with any of this.
Absolutely nothing. Back when I first came into the prison, the guards, I guess they decided they were going to throw me a welcome to the neighborhood party, so they put a knife in my cell and carried me back to the part of the prison they called the hole, where for the next 3 weeks they beat me, they starved me, and they tortured me in just about every way you can torture a human being. They beat me so bad I pissed blood. One of the things they did is they messed up my teeth. They caused a lot of damage in my teeth. Well, in prison there are no root canals, there are no crowns, there are no caps. I was in more pain than most people can imagine. Imagine the absolute worst toothache you've ever had in your life, and then imagine it multiplied by 10, and then imagining it lasting for years. Well, there was nothing I could do. You know, they told me, deal with the pain as long as you can, and then when you can't take it anymore, we'll pull your teeth out. I didn't want to live with no teeth. I didn't want to have to come and face my family with no teeth because I was beaten by a bunch of prison guards. So I had to learn things like Reiki, Qigong, therapeutic touch, you know, different types of meditation that allows you to deal with pain and physical illness and ailments. And
this was in what facility, your original facility?
That was in the one over there, yeah.
You have teeth now.
Exactly. It's allowed me to, these practices has allowed me to deal with the pain and keep it at bay enough to hold out.
So, after these boys died, how did you get pinpointed as one of the killers?
Back then, you know, things have changed a lot in the almost 20 years that I've been locked up. You know, now I'll see things on television. You'll have housewives that get tattoos and nose rings and things like that. And it wasn't like that back in 1993 in small town Arkansas.
Back then when this happened, what do you think it was that made the community, the state even, surrounding states, so certain that you guys were the ones that were involved in this?
This was 1993. Things were a lot different back then, even than they are now. You know, now you have housewives who have tattoos. And it wasn't really like that back then, at least not in Arkansas it wasn't. So.
That is from the great William Ramsey of William Ramsey Investigates channel. I love when he talks about his teeth and he goes, oh, exactly. But you have all your teeth. Your teeth are looking pretty good, and the taxpayers are paying for those teeth, and they look pretty good. And he's like, yeah, exactly. I mean, is that the best used car salesman impersonation you've ever heard?
He's not even that good.
No, he's terrible. And you can get a root canal in prison.
Yeah.
And caps and dental care.
They don't have salt and pepper, according to Ghislaine Maxwell. Their food is beyond bland. So come on.
Sense.
What kind of torture are they dealing with? You know, that they have to live with. Come on, guys. So
He
let's
said
talk
he healed
about
his teeth with meditation.
Yes.
And Reiki.
He just like feels their vibes.
Yeah.
Does that what's his face?
Rubbing
the energy
on his face. Is that what he's doing?
Yeah.
It's really like a parody. It really could be like, you know, Documentary Now could do. I don't know if I think they might have done did they do a parody of this, or is it just too dark? But I mean, they could really do a parody. I mean, his claims are so over the top. My favorite one is the one in the comedy club where he said he was in a comedy club in New York and he was worried about being shanked. He realized he realized he didn't worry. He was just having a good time. And then he remembered back. He remembered he didn't have to worry about being shanked like he did in prison. But when you're on death row, you're in your own cell. There's no.
Yeah, he was in solitary confinement.
Yeah,
Nobody did anything to him in prison.
Right.
Nobody.
He made some interesting claims. Does anybody want to take that about his time in prison? Besides about his
cinder block is my favorite one.
Yeah, that's the one. That's what I was going at. Do you want to take that, Josh?
I think he watched Shawshank Redemption too many times.
I think everybody did. We have John Fetterman Governor Pennsylvania saying that criminal lifers are really like your grandfather. And have you seen? And his proof is right after that he talks about the Shawshank Redemption. It's like they're just like in the Shawshank Redemption.
Well, I think
really
the cinder block thing he was talking about was there was a cinder block between him and his the guy in the cell next to him, and he could remove that, and that his cellmate would sneak over into his cell and assault him sexually. And for some reason, he never told anybody that it needed to be fixed so he could stop getting assaulted.
Well, actually, what happened was he and Mark Gardner, when this was all investigated by the Arkansas State Police and proven to be totally false, he and Mark Gardner made up this story to try and get better things in prison, better conditions in prison. That they made it up to benefit all the other prisoners.
Awesome.
To draw attention. And I think it was the cinder block could be removed, and then Mark Gardner was forcing Echols to crawl through the hole to be sexually assaulted every night.
He would have to do it.
Right.
Because Mark Gardner was too big to fit through the hole.
So Damien just had to go over
he
there.
was forcing, he was forcing
That's what it
him
was.
to
It's
crawl
even
through the
stupider
hole.
than the way I said it.
Yeah.
Dumbest thing I've ever heard.
But why?
Typical liar, when he gets caught, he just makes up something else. Well,
right.
We did this for a good reason. It was all lies, but they don't admit that it was a lie.
But how would Damien crawling his little skinny ass through a cinder block hole so he could get assaulted do anything for anybody in prison?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
To
I'm
bring
just
the
saying.
investigators in.
You didn't say it. I get it, Lisa. I know you didn't. I'm just saying,
I think he wanted to have sex with Mark Gardner.
Yeah, probably.
They got caught, so then he had to say it was non-consensual. But he's a horrible liar, and he doesn't, it doesn't. Because have you ever noticed what makes sense to a liar doesn't make sense to a normal person?
Yeah.
Their powers of reasoning. Look at Jodi Arias, Dahlia DiPolito, Damien Echols, Jason Baldwin. I mean, their brains are just on a different wavelength.
Right.
So, but yeah, I have no idea, but it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I just found that I found the cinder block thing just like and it's like, well, okay, if it's a problem, Damien, then you should tell the maintenance man. That way you don't have to go over there.
Correct.
Anymore.
Correct. Yeah.
Because he's not coming to get you because he can't fit through the hole.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure Echols cried in his pillow every night when Mark Gardner was executed. You should read Meryl Leverett's wonderful works about Mark Gardner.
I try and read literally nothing from her.
She loves it. I know she's like, oh, this great guy is convicted of horrible things.
Mm-hmm.
It's like her new best friend. Oh, it's
somebody
really
that
crazy.
Can spell and use punctuation. Like she is not.
She's rotted her brains with pot.
Probably. I would. Yeah.
Do you think that Jason and Damien had a relationship?
I've heard rumors. I've heard that there was a lot of weird stuff going on at those little meetings, including pedophilia, that some say that Damien was partaking in with little boys and things like that. He's also been a peeping Tom, but without any clear evidence, it's hard to know. But I've heard that several times.
Mm-hmm. Here's a great comment. If
Eric.
you think this was a fair trial, well, there were 2 trials.
Yeah.
So which one are you talking about? Are you talking about Miss Kelly's, or are you talking about Echols?
Must be the one you're talking about where
Baldwin. It seems you seem kind of unfamiliar with the case.
He probably thinks the trial was in West Memphis too.
Right. So, what do you think the future? So, if they get some kind of DNA, which I'll call the favorite sleight of hand of the Innocence Project, the our DNA didn't show up on this thing that you think that it should show up on, so that's an exoneration. If they get this DNA testing, or they release these DNA testing results from 2011, and they call it exonerating, will it help their campaign?
They will never release the 2011 results. I'm going to go out. They're pretending those don't exist.
Lori lost the paper, Lisa.
And yeah, of course. And so,
conspiracy.
They're going to try and get this, and it's going to be inconclusive, but they're going to present it as being exculpatory because their DNA isn't there. It doesn't matter that there's no DNA or that it's inconclusive. And there were some results that didn't exclude Echols, Baldwin, or Miskelly.
Correct.
And even in the early inconclusive arena. And that's one of the things that people don't understand. If you have an conclusive result that doesn't exclude the person convicted, it's game over on a motion for new trial. Even if it's not conclusive, it's game over. Because if it doesn't exclude one or all, that's your DNA.
You both have covered tons and tons of cases. How many hang on DNA?
Almost none.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very few, yeah.
Because if you want to say that DNA is the gold standard, which they say it isn't, in certain cases it can be. Like, most people are convicted on circumstantial, common sense evidence. That walks like a duck and talks like a duck. Everybody thinks that you need a picture with a fingerprint, semen, urine, hair, this and that. It's not how it works. And by the way, every appeal that they ever had got shot down. They were found guilty in two separate trials. One of those trials, Jesse's confession wasn't even allowed. They were just convicted based solely on witness statements and their own statements, nothing to do with Jesse. So they can say all they want. Well, Jesse who cares? Nobody used his confession in the trial. I mean, that doesn't matter. Jesse convicted himself. And by the way, Jesse was never going to get out of prison because he put himself in there with his own words. There was almost no basis for an appeal for him. I mean, you just play back his 17 confessions, post conviction confessions too.
And that's another issue that would have been raised at the new trial hearings by a DA, by the state. They could have brought in all of Ms. Kelly's confessions in that motion for new trial hearing, including the post-conviction confessions to cellmates, to guards, to people who visited him in prison. That would have been, all of that would have been fair game at the motion for new trial hearings because they were all going to proceed together. And this was going to be about all of the evidence, not just the new DNA, which was all inconclusive, but the existing evidence from the trial.
Yeah.
So, no, Miss Kelly was not going to win new trial.
No. And you know what? Jason, in the jury obviously believed Michael, what was his name? Michael Carson.
Yeah.
They believed him. He wasn't, everybody said, he was offered like $30,000. He wasn't offered anything. And, they tried to discredit him, which, they should, because that's their job. But the jury believed that. And Jesse or Jason had a real good chance of being found not guilty had it not been for that testimony. Now, I'm not saying that he was, obviously, I believe that he was fully, but he had a good shot at being acquitted. And I think it was the Michael Carson testimony that really sealed his fate.
Yes.
Good point. So this, I thought, Josh, when you started, and you've covered a lot of cases, when you started out your question like that, I really thought you were going to say, in any other case, have people been so aggressive, so angry, so insulting? And Terry Hobbs brought up that this can be an intimidation campaign. And certainly when the spotlight comes on you, when they bring up that, when they target someone and put out a name in the public domain of the new killer, your life changes.
The fake outrage has always fascinated me. I think there's a lot of people that think, just from watching, by the way, when I watched Paradise Lost the first time, I was like, guilty. It was like, dude, guilty. And for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons specifically was that testimony from the girls at the softball game. And I was just like, wow, like that's, and then, they're like, oh, and there's a confession. Oh, so there's a confession. And then the way Damien's, or the way that Jesse's lawyer, or not Jesse's, Jason's lawyer was talking, I was like, I mean, we all know who the ringleader is. We all know whose idea this was. And I get that Jason and Jesse may have been, just kind of there because he was their friend and he needed more people. But it was just, to me, it's just blatantly obvious. His the way he answered questions to the FBI was insane. The things that he said, like, oh, you wouldn't be able to hear the screams because of the freeway and all that, but he never been there before, never once been there. I mean, he's just the biggest liar. I mean, he rivals Casey Anthony when it comes to like lying. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. I think
Roberta.
you're muted, Roberta.
I'm sorry. Where do you think this is going? I think we can wrap this up a little bit. Where do you think this is going?
Nowhere fast.
Yeah, nowhere. He just wants to keep his name. Yeah, he wants to keep his name in the forefront. And Jason will chime in every now and then to keep his name out there too. And that's all they're going to do until the day they each die.
Right.
Which can't come soon enough.
Yeah, I think, and it's funny, they always say we're going to do all these great things on the outside, and you look at Jason Baldwin, raised $30,000 for a book, never made anything with it. Look at Damien Echols, sort of farting around with the occult and karate. I mean, making no great impact on society except, to glorify himself. And Miss Kelly's, back to the trailer park. And, you mentioned the case of Anthony Porter. They get him off death row and he goes back to, the rumor is, being a pimp and dies of a heroin overdose. So it's like, they say, it's like, when I'm a free man, I'm going to do all this. I'm going to breathe the air and smell the flowers. And that ends up to be,
By the way, I love Metallica. Love them. I do. Been a fan.
Are you wearing black? Are you wearing black? They're going to arrest you.
I am. I'm wearing black.
Anytime they could break into your home and arrest you any minute now.
I have a black sweatshirt on. I love Metallica.
Thanks.
it's just foolish. It's just foolish. And a lot of people, I think, are like, well, look, I went to, when I was going to school, goth was in, like, it was a thing, right? And I had a lot of friends that from 7th grade, and then you get into high school, and then you see them, and you're like, oh, they have spiky blue hair, and they're wearing, like, you know, but they were just the same person. They just dressed. They weren't psychotic. They weren't evil. They weren't any of. They were just goth. It was a thing, you know. And so that's a really big gap to go from like goth to you know, liking. You know, Jason sits there and says, well, you know, I don't worship the devil. I worship Jesus like everybody else here. Like, yeah, sure you do, buddy. And then, but all of that is just like false flag stuff where they want you to believe that they were targeted because they had long hair, and Metallica was selling out all over the world. Antarctica, they sold out a show in Antarctica. They're the only band to ever do that. They're the most popular band in the world. And to say we like that kind of music, and I wear a Metallica shirt sometimes, is one of the dumbest excuses. And I'll say this really too, because I know you want to wrap this up. Is there a worse lawyer in the world than Dan Stidham? He's a judge now, for God's sakes. That guy was the worst defense. He was dumber than Jesse.
Good.
Yeah.
No,
He walks up, when he walks up and he says, he writes on this big piece of paper, false confession or whatever. He says, he goes, what Jesse Miskelly did was a false confession. Then he points to both words. He goes, it's a false confession. And you're going, good one, buddy.
Wait, the emphasis is on the false.
I know.
Like, linguistic programming. You know,
for me, the worst thing, and the thing that he could have done, was fallen on his sword and said, I should have let him take the deal and testify at the trial against Echols and Baldwin. Miss Kelly could have had a reduced sentence and seen daylight.
Absolutely.
In 20 years, 25, 30 years. I don't remember what Arkansas's rules were, but he could have gotten that life sentence knocked off.
Any lawyer now, and by the way, the prosecuting attorneys were very, very good. They did, and a lot of that gets lost. The judge was fantastic. The prosecutors were fantastic, and Lisa, you're right. Any lawyer worth his salt would have said, "Hey, you want to see the light of day again? You've confessed 100,000 times here, buddy.
Right.
You're going to have to testify, and you'll be out in 20 years or 15 years, or, you know, maybe 10 with good behavior, but you're going to have to do something." Instead, he went for broke and was going to let Jesse, who probably had the least amount of culpability in the case, but still tons nonetheless. I mean, he chased poor Michael down and beat the hell out of him. Who knows what else he did? But, you know, he left early, and he seemed like the only one to have any kind of conscience about the crime at all. And not that I'm not a Jesse Miskelly sympathizer, but he absolutely was the only one that seemed bothered by this down the road.
Yes.
And at the time. Couldn't hold it in.
Yeah, that's a great point. May Brussel Project, thank you so much for the super sticker. So, yeah, Jesse Miskelly, the whole way they treat him, and none of the supporters say anything. Like, they don't find it odd that he doesn't show up to the parties. He's not giving the interviews. It's really like, you know, I've said this before, but Damien Echols is like the James Dean. Baldwin's like the Sal Mineo, and Miss Kelly is nowhere to be seen. It's like the ghost.
Miss Kelly does not want to be bothered. He's just a country boy who liked mischief and didn't mind beating up little kids. Wasn't the first time that he had been in trouble for I think he smacked around a little girl. He was on probation for like assaulting another kid. And like, it's just, but I don't know if he, I don't know if he was a cold-blooded killer in his mind until he met somebody that kind of pushed that out of him. You know what I mean? Damien definitely had a big impact and on Jesse's life and on Jason's life. And by the way, he's left both of them in the dust.
Right. Good point. I mean,
He doesn't care
any
about-
relationship,
care
you
about
don't see him with depth. I'm just going to read this super chat real quick. John V, thank you so much for the $4.99. Just found your channel a few weeks ago. Great content, especially on the West Memphis 3. Thank you. Your channel has the most in-depth analysis of the case next to Based in Fact and the lab it does. That's
you.
for sure. Thanks. I have not done a podcast on the Mark Avery case. Okay, Danny Doom. Is there going to be? Oh wait, hold on. Here we go. Is there
It
going to be
always
a
comes
part
back
two
to
with
Gary,
Gary
doesn't it?
Meese? I love Gary Meese. I think he's taking a little breather right now. I invited him on tonight. And
Did he get
didn't
back
hear
to you?
back. Woody Ramsey was going to show up in the second hour, and just wrote me at the last minute and said, like while we were talking, like 5 minutes ago, that he's not going to make it. So, yeah, this was going to be a real bonanza. But
Don't you guys know that Gary is a top-notch pickleball player? He's got things to do. You know, he's also the president of the pickleball club. I heard.
Thank you, Danny Doom, for the $4.99.
I love that
appreciate
guy.
it.
Gary is something, man. He's
awesome.
A beautiful human, and I'm proud to call him my friend.
Thank you, Kelly O, for the super sticker.
Kelly O, what's up? That's a lab rat right there.
All
Flippers,
right.
lab rat.
Thank you so much.
We got some lab rats in the house.
Yeah, this really takes the sting out of Lisa's episode being demonetized like immediately. And they're like, Rodney Reed?
What?
R-A-P-E?
Oh,
Yeah,
I
it was
didn't
like,
know.
yeah, they demonetized that thing like very quickly. So.
Oh, I'm
They were
sorry.
I was like filling it out like respectful discussion, definitely. And I'm like thinking, no way is this going to pass the. They make it sound so good, like you can pass these kind of guidelines, and then whatever.
Yeah.
So I've done it though. I mean, is there anything that we forgot? Is there anything that there's like an important element of this case or the PR around the case?
I think unfortunately, Steve Branch, Michael Moore, Chris Byers get lost in the shuffle and the attention focused on their killers. Regardless of what you believe, under the law, Echols, Baldwin, and Miscali remain guilty in the eyes of the law, factually and legally. They can say they're innocent all they want, but that's not how the law is going to look at it. And so I think that more people should respect the victims and the families, and maybe instead of dragging this out year after year, it's been 30 years. Let's let them rest in peace.
Right.
And I got interested in this case about a little bit before the release. I'm 37. I'll be 38 years old this year, the same age as those boys. I did the same exact stuff that those kids were doing, riding bikes. I was in Boy Scouts. And I remember a time where I was riding my bike with my friends, and some high school kids yelled at us and it started to chase us, like just being jerks. We were on bikes and we got away. And I remember, being a 7 or 8 year old kid, I was terrified. It was like terrifying. And then I was thinking about what the three little boys, Stevie, Michael, and Michael Moore, Stevie Branch, and Christopher Byers. And I would think about, it's like 100,000 times worse I mean, I just think about how terrified they were, and it's heartbreaking, to be honest with you. And the fact that they were lying about this murder, this triple homicide of children, was crazy.
Thank you, Danny Doom, for the $4.99. Is Miss Kelly still in West Memphis? I want to talk to that guy. I believe he's around that area in the trailer park.
He's in the
Am I
trailer
wrong?
his dad was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. His father died
Right.
about a year or two ago. And he had been living with Susie Brewer. That didn't work out. He was living with other family friends, but I don't know where he has landed or what's going on with him. He may still be in Lakeshore or the Highland Trailer Park in Marion.
Right.
But I don't know, since his father died.
And matter of fact, he's actually gotten in a little bit of trouble a couple of times.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
From what I understood is that if that ever happened, they send him right back, but they didn't.
No, Ellington didn't do that.
No,
and I don't think the new DA is going to do it.
That guy sucks too, by the way.
Although their SIS agreements expired in 2021, so they're done.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, if they say they got caught doing something, and that was a felony level, like, judge would be like, oh yeah, well, look at the murders on
that would enhance the sentence for that crime, because they are convicted of felony murder, but they can't send them back for the 21 years they still owe.
Right.
On the SIS agreement.
Right.
Because that was with the terms of the SIS. If they committed a felony during those 10 years, they'd go back for 21.
Right.
Yeah. I just want to say one thing on the close. And please like this video, share it, let people send it to your favorite West Memphis 3 supporter. Is that this case really changed my whole life and my whole way of thinking. And I know that sounds dramatic, but just to hear the other side, shout out to Ed Opperman's show, I'd never heard the other side of this case ever. Everything in the mainstream media was they were innocent, the whole innocent narrative. I was totally, unlike Josh and probably Lisa, who's very street savvy, I was totally duped by these documentaries. I was excited when they got out. I was totally fooled. And to watch, I think there's a very important moment in this case, which is the moment that they announce that they did the DNA testing, they announced the shoelaces, they say that they're going to go to trial again, or ask for a new trial. Looks like perhaps maybe that might happen. And instead, that new trial just magically disappears. It's like a sleight of hand. And the Alford plea takes its place. And then the Alford plea's been rewritten. They have a full-time, these killers have full-time PR agent named Lonnie Surrey, which is amazing that killers have PR agents, Amanda Knox, etc. Not the only one. And they say, oh, the state made us take the Alford plea. And we had to take it because Damien was dying of bad eyesight and teeth. I mean, that's a very important sleight of hand that happens there. And you see it. I just always make fun of him for that, because they would say, he's dying. No, those were his big complaints. It's just that, I mean, I think someone could argue maybe you could get some kind of infection. Goes to your
well, if it did, it can happen to a nicer guy.
Nicer guy, right? It's just after all this, like, it's funny in both The Making a Murderer, they make it seem like the townspeople are so irrational to not like these people. Like the Avery clan were criminal, like the criminal element in that town. Why would the town like them? Ditto Damien Echols, he was criminal element, lighting fires, killing dogs, killing cats, stabbing frogs with wood, stalking young children.
And that has nothing to do with
walking around in a trench coat, 24/7. That trench coat's never to be seen again after the murders. Isn't that
Yeah.
strange? There was never a crime like this ever again after the murders. And I just want to put out a question, 2 questions to West Memphis 3 supporters. One is, why did he confess so many times against his best interest? And if you're going to answer, it's his low IQ. How does low IQ make you confess against your best interest post conviction confessions? Many. And secondly, why do the West Memphis 3 lie, especially Damien Echols? I mean, they all lie. Miss Kelly, the least. That's why they keep them away. But why do they lie so much about their case? Why do their stories change so much if they're supposedly innocent people? And with that, Lisa, where can people find you?
I am on Based in Fact, True Crime Podcast. We are on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, Based in Fact. And then find me on Facebook, Twitter. You can follow me at O'Brien L. Ann. And we have a Facebook page, and you can find me on Facebook as well.
Josh.
Well, first I want to say thank you for inviting me. It was a no-brainer. As soon as I saw it, I was like, of course. This case has been very near and dear to my heart. And you can find me on the lab on YouTube, and I have quite a few videos about the West Memphis 3. And yeah, I mean, but just thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed talking about it. It's an infuriating case, and sometimes you kind of want to make light of some of the things. I said this once to Gary. I said, when they talk about the low IQ, like you just said, and I said that Brendan Dassey makes Jesse Miskelly look like Stephen Hawking. If you really Jesse was simple. He wasn't handicapped. He could read fine. He was pretty savvy, mechanically and things like that. And the confessions are solid.
Mm-hmm.
He knew things about the crime. That's what investigators look for. Details of the crime that nobody else would know about except the police and the killers. And he knew a lot, even when he threw in little junk stuff, and he admitted to trying to throw them off, the times and things like that. He had 1 foot in, 1 foot out. He knew exactly what he was doing when he confessed the very first time. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much.
Josh.
My pleasure. And check out, Lisa has a great new episode on Molly Corbett. And thank you so much, Spoof. Please like this like this show, subscribe, and have a great weekend, everybody. It's Friday, and please enjoy the weekend. I'll talk to you soon. All right.
Thanks, Roberta.
Good night.
Night.